Where are you on this agenda?
I think I'm number one.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the August 9th meeting of the City of Charleston Traffic and Transportation Committee. Thank everybody for being here on a hot, what is today, Wednesday afternoon. As you might recall, this is not necessarily a regularly scheduled meeting, although we do have some regularly scheduled business. And then we're going to take up a public comment period based on the last meeting that we had. So before we begin, I'd just like to ask we all have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. One other matter of housekeeping for those who are visiting with us here today. This is a committee of 5 members. I am the chairman. Thank you very much. My name is Mike Seekings. The mayor is also a member of this committee. There's another member who'll be in person in just a minute, his Councilmember Brady. And then we have 2 council members that are participating online. You can see there's Councilmember Parker, wave if you're listening to us. And Councilmember Gregg is also online too. Also here is Councilmember Shade. He's not a member of the committee, but we allow him to sit in. And we want to thank all of you for being here and for coming. So with that, there's one piece of old business we need to take up, which is to review and discuss and recommend regarding the parking and storage commercial vehicles ordinance that we've been discussing for some period of time. How are we going to handle this one?
I can explain it to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
We actually, sorry to interrupt, we actually need to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
we
so
can do
sorry.
that. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 18, 2023?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'm going to need someone in cyberspace. I saw Councilmember Gregg seconded it. Any discussion, additions, deletions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. All right, now, thank you for keeping me straight. Next.
So at the last TNT committee meeting, we presented a proposed language for a proposed ordinance for the parking or storage of commercial vehicles. The committee felt that it was too broad in its applicability. They asked staff to narrow it down. I met with Councilmember Shade and Chairman Seekings, and we changed the definition. That is the only thing that has changed from the last meeting. You can see that on page 2 of my memo. The definition of commercial vehicles now reads any commercial landscaping equipment and any vehicle that requires a commercial driver's license to operate.
And as a matter of procedure, this is now going to go back to the real estate committee. Is that where we're heading with this?
Actually, if the committee reports it out favorably, it'll be on the agenda for the September Planning Commission because it is a change to the zoning ordinance. And then it will come to full council for first reading.
Got it. Okay. And what have we done with this so far? We've just deferred it for further refinement and discussion. Is that all we've done?
Yes, sir. We've refined it a couple of times.
And we've not yet taken any affirmative or negative action.
Correct.
Okay. All right. What's the pleasure of this committee? Anybody? As the chair, I don't think I can make a motion. So I think it's probably a good thing to send this on to the Planning Commission, let them confer about it. Can I get a motion for that?
Yeah. So
All
moved.
right, Mayor has moved to send this to the Planning Commission for their consideration. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I take it, Mr. Mayor, your motion would include the new definition.
Absolutely.
All right, so the motion is send it to the Planning Commission with its new definition for its consideration. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilmember Shade, I see that you're there. I hate to put you on the spot, but I do believe this is in an issue in your district. How do you feel about this particular item?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Councilmember Parker, for that question. So
I'm going to give him a minute and a half.
I'm gonna take 10. So thank you for the question. We've been wrestling with this, I think, Melissa, since maybe November of last year, as I recall. I brought to council's full attention the problem with commercial vehicles parking overnight, particularly on the Sumar Street site, and then adjoining properties that had been vacated or abandoned. But one of the worst culprits of all of this has been at Ashley Landing bowling lanes. They have allowed the South Carolina Department of Transportation to park their landscaping trucks and equipment on that spot. Ashley Landing butts right up to Ashley Hall Manor, right into the backyard of several residents. The city has posted signs on our Sumo Street site and placed chains around so that no vehicles are allowed to come to the property and park overnight. So we've addressed it by a backdoor mechanism. This committee had several questions and issues of whether or not our definitions and our restrictions were either too narrow or too broad. We certainly were not trying to prevent short-term use of these vehicles parking, particularly if they're here to unload, such as at Publix or at Harris Teeter or some of the grocery stores in this general vicinity. So we simplified this to include commercial driver's license and landscaping type vehicles. I think this is a very clear definition that we can get in front of the planning commission in our planning department. It will address West Ashley in particular being used as a dumping site. And this goes to a consistent provision of revitalization of West Ashley. And I would hope that when it goes in front of the planning commission that they will adopt this. Appreciate the committee's patience with me on this and their work with our legal department.
And follow up, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if she wants to come back to the mic, I just want to be sure. So this won't include, let's say, an individual who lives in the city on James Island parking their commercial vehicle in their driveway.
I think the way we have this worded is that it is protecting homeowners and property folks. So this is mainly designed to address those, lack of a better way of saying it, squatters.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And I don't know on Johns Island or on James Island, this has been much of an issue out there yet. Hopefully I don't see this on Daniel Island either, but in other areas, particularly in West Ashley, this has become an epidemic problem that we have not addressed, and hopefully this will take care of that problem.
Any follow-up, Councilmember Parker? Any other questions? Councilmember Brady, welcome. We're taking up item 3A. We have a motion and a second on the floor to send this for consideration to the Planning Commission based on some amendments that came to our legal department. We're now in debate. Is there any question you might have or comment you might have about it? Is there anything else from any member of the committee? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. All right, next item on our agenda is number 4. If you've got an agenda with you, it's discussion and presentation on the resolution regarding the municipal state highway project agreement with the SCDOT. It's similar to the discussion we had a month ago. I understand that Mr. Dillon is here sitting around the table with us from the SCDOT. Here's how we're going to proceed on this. Mr. Dillon is going to give us a presentation. We'll leave it to the committee to ask any questions about that presentation. Then we're going to do something we very rarely do around here, but I'm happy to do it. And we're going to open this up for public comment. I just looked at the list when I walked in and just got a text. We have 13 people that are signed up for public comment. Do we have any more based on where we were?
We have 18
Okay,
total.
we have 18. Depending on how long this presentation goes, we're going to give each person between a minute and a minute and a half. I'll let you know before we get through this presentation. Don't feel that you have to take up all your time, but we certainly want to hear what you have to say, and we welcome you. So with that, Mr. Dillon, I'm going to turn this over to you, and thank you and your team, if you don't mind introducing them, very much for being here. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, council members, Mr. Mayor, members of the public. I'm Brent Dillon, the Director of Traffic Engineering for SCDOT. I have here with me Duncan Smith, our State Safety Engineer, and Kaylin Metz, who's a traffic safety program manager for this project. You may remember back in July, we gave a presentation, or Kaylin gave a detailed presentation at both the Transportation Committee meeting and then again at the City Council meeting. I'm not going to represent that information to you. I felt what would be helpful if I made a brief statement to sort of address some concerns. I can provide that statement in writing to whoever would like it, and then we'll just proceed to the public comment portion. So again, I'm Brent Dillon, Director of Traffic Engineering. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with a brief update to help clarify many of the comments that have been received in relation to the 4 safety projects being developed on King Street, Meeting Street, Calhoun Street, and St. Philip Street. First, I would like to reiterate the need for these important safety projects. As you heard at the last month's presentation, these projects are ranked number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 6 on our 2018 road safety audit list for bicycle and pedestrian crashes in the state. With the most recent crash data added, there are more than 3,000 total crashes along these corridors in the last 8.5 years. Those numbers include 152 pedestrian crashes and 94 bicycle crashes. The current SCDOT plans are the same that were presented at the public information meeting in August of 2022. The redesigned typical sections for Lower King Street came at the request of the City of Charleston through the municipal agreement process and will require approval from the city before SCDOT makes any final changes to the King Street plans. It is not uncommon to have a municipality request revisions before the municipal agreement is signed. SCDOT is required to enter into a municipal agreement with the city before the project can move forward for the final design and implementation. SCDOT has been listening to the concerns voiced regarding the proposed safety improvement projects, both in the media and at the July 18th City Council meeting. 2 concerns have been expressed that I would like to address specifically at this time. As part of this project, we offer continued opportunity for public engagement and participation. Many of the people that submitted comments at the August 2022 meeting requested a response from SCDOT with questions about that final project. We will provide those responses as soon as the plans are finalized. At this time, comment responses cannot be provided as the final design of these projects is still to be determined and depends on the city's approval or disapproval of the improvement designs. Once final designs are determined, all submitted comments that requested a response will receive one. I want to clarify why the marked bike lane for Lower King from Calhoun Street to Broad Street is proposed to be removed from the King Street plans. The City of Charleston, along with other stakeholders such as the King Street Business Improvement District, the College of Charleston, and the Charleston Downtown Alliance members expressed concern for the Lower King Street marked bike lane and asked that the design be reevaluated to accommodate their concern. SCDOT then redesigned the Lower King Street corridor typical sections to address the stakeholders' concerns while still providing pedestrian and bicycle safety accommodations. This proposed revision was submitted to the city for consideration as an alternative to the marked bike lane. The proposed revision is just that, a proposed revision. SCDOT understands the historical importance of these corridors. Meeting Street and King Street are the oldest and most famous streets in South Carolina. Their use predates the creation of the United States. For over 300 years, people have used these streets. They have traveled by foot, horse, carriage, bicycle, car, truck, and bus, and trolley, and they still do. In this context that we at SCDOT recognize the importance of public and political dialogue. Our goal is to improve safety in balance with the unique historical context. This is what the municipal agreement process protects. SCDOT will continue to work closely with the City of Charleston, the public, and other local stakeholders to advance these important safety projects as best as possible. We are grateful to the council and this committee for your continued commitment to this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we turn this over to public comment, is there anybody on the committee who has any questions for Mr. Dillon and his team or any comments they'd like to make before we turn this over to public comment? I'll start online. Councilmember Parker, Councilmember Gregg. Mayor?
Councilmember Parker.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Parker. Yes, ma'am.
Sure, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just again, just to reiterate, I mean, the plan that was presented last time, this is for safety reasons. I mean, that was just to highlight, this is the safest path forward.
That is a recommendation has come forward from the SCDOT with the comments made by Mr. Dillon based on input after their recommendations. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor. You're not speaking. If you can turn off your mic, someone's.
There we go, testing.
Thanks.
So I would like to ask SCDOT collectively, whoever's appropriate. That one of the comments that was made during our recent meeting, and maybe it was at city council, had to do with the tendency of folks to ride a little faster, go faster if the lane width is expanded. So I just thought I would ask y'all's experience on that point. It seemed like certainly related to safety, and we were making the case that we were, in addition to having the bike track over on St. Philip Street, which is what our bike ped plan originally proposed, that what we were proposing, the new proposal for King Street would calm traffic as well. So are those two things that contrary to each other? Is that clear enough to get a response? Because
Yeah, I think we understand that there's been comments made about the lane width. I guess that's what you're speaking to.
yes, sir.
And yes, lane width is a factor that affects vehicle speed.
Mhm.
There's also other factors that affect vehicle speed. So in this context, there's a lot of contributing factors. We're going to be adding bulb outs. There's going to be changes to the signal timing. There's the parking on both sides and things like that. So those all work together in terms of how you drive. I think there's a portion of King Street farther up where maybe that lane is actually today closer to 14. We just drove it coming in here. And so the pedestrians that are there, the businesses, the proximity of them, all of those things affect how fast a driver feels comfortable driving.
Correct. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions before we turn this over to public comment? It must be me. Any other questions? Councilmember Brady? Okay, how many people do we have signed up?
We have a total of 18 people
18
signed to
people. All
speak.
right, here's what we're gonna do. We'll call out 3 at a time, get ready to go. We'll give you each a minute and a half. Please come forward, state your name, and the committee is ready to go. Yes, sir.
All right, so we have 5 speakers who signed up online, so we can start with those speakers first. Okay. Belvin Olasov. Apologize in advance for any mispronunciations.
You got there. Hello, Belvin Olasov, 428 Ray Street, Charleston Climate Coalition. Climate change and its impacts are Charleston's greatest threat. While it is a global problem, Charleston can do its part to combat climate change by working to reduce emissions and waste locally and leading larger conversations regionally. These are the words of Chairman Mike Seekings from 2019, and I agree wholeheartedly with his words. I believe in Charleston's ability to be a leader on climate action, and 29% of US greenhouse gas emissions, according to the EPA, come from transportation. You reduce transportation emissions by offering safe, reliable alternatives to car travel. Like, for example, saying yes to over 3,000 feet of protected bike lane on a central corridor, paid for and designed by the state and federal government, instead of saying no. This was the hottest summer ever recorded in human history, and yet we're struggling for a bike lane. Charleston County's projected climate costs are over $6 billion by 2040, and yet we're struggling for a bike lane. And why? Both the bike lane option and the 14-foot wide lane option have the same amount of extra parking spaces and loading zones, And if the sharers are to be believed, you expect cyclists to use the sides of the lane regardless of whether it's protected or not. So why not accept the original SCDOT proposal? Also, I like that y'all are planning on extending the St. Philip Bikeway by 2 blocks. It seems you have funding available and it would help connectivity for CFC students, but it's not either or. Accepting federal funds for the King Street bike lane and using city funds for St. Philip is exactly the sort of forward-thinking, active planning I would expect from traffic transportation and the climate action leader, Charleston, South Carolina. I believe in you. I believe in our city. If we kill a central bike lane for no good reason, I will believe in you less, and I want to believe in you. Thank you.
Rowan Emerson. Followed by Alan Holmes, followed by Zach Basidi.
Hi, I'm Rowan Emerson. I live at 47 Ash. I really want to thank you for making the time for this public comment period. The only thing I'm certain of that will be gained with this new plan is an increase in accidents, injuries, and death for Charlestonians and tourists. As of 2020, South Carolina is second in pedestrian fatality rate, according to the NHTSA. And King Street is the 3rd most dangerous street in the 2nd most dangerous state for pedestrians. There needs to be some fundamental changes here. Something is clearly lacking in the current proposition. We have heard from a diverse range of your constituents who are relying on you to make a well-intentioned decision so they can get to their houses, their works, and their classes without having to worry if they'll make it again tomorrow. While you have said that there will be an addition to the bike lane on St. Philip of around 500 feet, I'm not mistaking this concession for progress, considering the loss of the King Street bike lane would be a loss of over 3,000 feet of federally funded bike infrastructure. The empirical evidence that bike infrastructure creates safer cities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists is irrefutable. To say that this new plan is in line with national and local research, including the People Pedal Plan, is simply not true. We have heard that installing a bike lane on King is not a good idea because of its topography, the convex shape of King Street, and that riding on the left side of the street would be dangerous for bikers. But no bikers will be riding in the middle of this new extra wide lane unless they purposefully want to be tailgated by a jacked up Ford F-150 at them that is honking to get them to move out of the way. I'm not involved in this discussion because I have a drive to speak publicly or get on your nerves. I'm involved because I hope that I and my loved ones can continue to walk these streets and bike these streets uninjured and alive. Thank you.
Alan Holmes.
I'm Alan Holmes. I live at Wentworth Street. My wife and I have lived there over 40 years. I work in the Frankie building. I'm a lawyer. A lawyer takes more than a minute and a half to clear his throat. But I'm going to try to keep it in bounds here. I ride a bicycle. I'm 76 years old. I ride around town all the time. I would have ridden it here, except for the fact y'all don't have a place to lock it up. On lane width, I decided to look this stuff up on the internet. You know, people are always doing their research. So I looked, and you can start with Wikipedia. In urban settings, both extra narrow lanes, less than 9.2 feet, and wide lanes, over 10.2 to 10.5 feet, are dangerous, more dangerous than a 10-foot lane. There's no question. Speed goes up. There are more collisions. There are more deaths when the collisions occur. I thought, well, maybe it's just Wikipedia. I looked at the underlying research that's cited in the Wikipedia. It looked legitimate to me, but then I looked at the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and they say lane widths of 10 feet are appropriate in urban areas and have a positive impact on the street safety without impacting traffic operations. I could not find a single source. I mean, even I took transportation economics over 50 years ago in undergraduate school. I looked back at my book. There is no source in America currently that recommends a 14-foot street in an urban area like this with heavy traffic. It is
Time.
It's purely political. Thank you very much.
Zach Basidi.
Zach Facidi, 59 Cypress. I actually used to live in this corridor, 297 King Street. I would bike to work at Sanders Clyde Elementary School every single day. And getting there was really easy. And in 16 years in the city, which pales in comparison to what other people have been, I've seen the enormous growth in this city. And if every single person is going to get around in a single person vehicle, we are in for trouble. We're already encouraging our tourists, our visitors to use more Lime bikes, but we're not giving them the adequate lane and safety measures that go alongside that. It seems bizarre, perverse, and quite frankly, negligent. People ride down King Street, and I often see them riding on the sidewalks. And it's not because they don't want to ride that lane, that area. It's because they feel it is too dangerous. So providing them with a federally funded, safe lane for themselves will not only encourage more people to do it, but it'll do so in a safe and effective manner. Changing this behind closed doors is unacceptable, and we really need to follow through with the originally proposed plan by SCDOT.
Thank you very much. Who else we got?
Joe McGee, followed by
Good
Cecilia Spain.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Thanks for the meeting this afternoon. I concur with the gentleman from Wentworth. I did ride my bike here, and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chairman, we just need more bike parking here at City Hall. I don't think it requires a TIF bond or any kind of, just more hardware and more, another hole in the concrete.
You have that nice wrought iron fence right over there.
I'm using the lamppost right now. I concur.
We'll find a bike rack around here.
I concur with some of the thoughts here that's already been expressed. The original RSA audit or the road safety audit recommended a buffered bike lane. The presence of a bike lane with pedestrian traffic will serve to kind of slow traffic on King Street. The RSA audit pointed out the number of sides. I mean, there's danger to the vehicles as well as danger to people who are trying to ride King Street today, as well as walk King Street. I think we need to slow it down. And clearly, the making it the lane wider will not serve to slow vehicular traffic. And it seems to me we want to promote pedestrian and bicycle traffic on our keynote commercial street here in the city.
Great. Thank you very much.
Cecilia Spain, followed by Casey Conrad.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Spain, 61 Vanderhorst Street. I'm once again speaking as a student at the College of Charleston. The college's opposition to the King Street bike lane was not shared with the faculty, staff, or students and represents only the administration's standpoint. This process is also happening at a time where a majority of students are not on or around campus, giving them a disadvantage when it comes to sharing their opinion. A majority of students are required to commute to campus each day, and the college requires students to complete 60 hours before being eligible for a parking pass. Therefore, a greater part of the student body is commuting to campus via walking or biking. This incoming freshman class for the 2023-24 school year consists of 500 more students than usual, meaning there will be 500 more people on and around King Street. The college supports the proposed bike lane on St. Philip Street, which is great, but doesn't fully account for students downtown. The campus extends beyond King Street, specifically the Johnson and Silcox Center, forcing students to cross King Street in between classes. Simply, I cannot understand how benefits of a 14-foot wide traffic lane could possibly outweigh the costs of having no bike lane. At the end of the day, a 14-foot wide lane for traffic on King Street is dangerous. It promotes speeding and unnecessarily omits the proposal of a bike lane that could increase safety. Thank you.
Casey Conrad, followed by Ryan Seward.
Good afternoon, traffic and transportation. My name is Casey Conrad. I'm a GIS analyst at the city, but I'm here today as a vulnerable road user. So we've seen the numbers on Upper and Lower King, the crashes, bike and pedestrian, and of course the side swipes on Lower King. I've been hit in the last 10 years 3 times on Upper King Street. One of the times put me in the hospital for about a week. If you're gonna build a bike lane or not build a bike lane on Lower King, you should not widen the street. In addition to promoting speeding, wider travel lanes encourage Uber and Lyft drivers to stop in the middle of the street. I don't think they need any encouragement there. It also encourages larger vehicles, and I think you know the type I'm talking about, to motor down King Street, revving their engines with no particular destination. As a GIS analyst, I did some measurements around town on street widths. So Calhoun Street, Meeting and King is 9 feet. Calhoun Street east of Meeting is 10. Meeting Street north of Calhoun is 11. Meeting Street south of Calhoun is 10. Lockwood Drive is 10.5. The Crosstown is 11. Morrison Drive is 11. The Ravenel Bridge is 11.5. And I-26 is 11.5. I struggled to find another 14-foot street anywhere in Charleston except for one, and that is Upper King Street, where we have had 289 total crashes, 22 of those bike and 12 pedestrian. I think if you want to make Lower King as dangerous as Upper King, add the 14-foot lane. But support for the larger lane puts personal property over the safety and well-being of the majority of road users, 4 times as many. In short, support for the 14-foot lane puts auto bodies over human bodies. Thank you.
Ryan Seward, followed by Katie Zimmerman.
Ryan Sork. I live on 4 Miranda Home Street, and since I've lived in Charleston 12 years now, I've never had a car. I've always bike commuted to work, to school. So I could speak for how treacherous the roads are out there for bike riders. I just have to speak in favor of the original proposal. I just think the 14-foot wide lane is just dangerous to pedestrians, to bikers. The buffered bike lane is just the safest option for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. And that's it. Thank you.
Katie Zimmerman, followed by Sandra Fowler.
Hi, I'm Katie Zimmerman, Executive Director of Charleston Moves. Thank you so much for hosting this comment period. I appreciate it. In addition to what's already been stated, BCDCOG, they have done bike ped counts at the intersections of St. Philip and Calhoun and King and Calhoun, along with all of the different turning movements. And what's really interesting is by the hour, you've got thousands of people biking and walking at both of those intersections. King Street has a little bit more of people biking and walking and headed south than St. Philip does. But clearly, these are areas that need bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, the most robust possible. So I would ask that you, rather than disassembling what DOT has proposed, instead add to it. We submitted comments last year with suggestions for improvement. We already very much support the bike lane on King. We had ideas for improvement, how to make it even better. So I love that the city is proposing to extend the cycle track on St. Philip. Please do it. But also, let's get a bike lane on King. Also, let's two-way come. Let's keep this network going. Let's keep progressing and keep getting the system in place so that we can choose to travel safely in multiple modes. Also, not a single planning guide recommends 14-foot travel lane in an urban area, none. The 12-foot travel lane that's proposed to be adjacent to the King Street bike lane in DOT's plan is wider than what these planning guides recommend, even for streets with buses. CARTA just needs an 11-foot lane, according to every single planning guide we've looked at, including NACDO, which the city is a member of. So 12 feet, a 12-foot lane of traffic on King with a bike lane next to it, that's great. Increasing the amount of parking, I'm not as concerned about that. I know others are. So yay, that's great too.
Time.
Thank you.
Sandra Fowler, followed by Ronald Malcolm.
Hi, I'm Sandra Fowler. I live at 9 Simonton Mews, and I take about 90% of my travel downtown by bicycle, and I ride regularly down King Street, and I want to speak in the strongest terms that I can against the 14-foot lane, which I perceive to be greatly worse than current state, even because what we have now effectively, because the right lane is nearly blocked all the time, there's plenty of width for a brave cyclist to travel down that lane with the traffic slowed in the other lane. And I perceive a 14-foot lane is just extremely dangerous and 10 steps backward from current state even. Thank you.
Ronald Malcolm, followed by Carol Jackson.
Hi, my name is Ronald Malcolm. I live at 1193 River Road. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to accept public comment today. We've all heard about how cycling can improve personal health, reduce environmental impacts associated with transportation, and can actually improve transportation in congested urban areas. And I'm not going to belabor those points. But I do want to ask you to take a moment to envision a couple of scenarios. One is a person who is a low-wage worker who can't afford to or doesn't have access to a car and works on Lower King Street. The other scenario I want you to imagine is a couple of first-time visitors to Charleston who've heard about King Street and elect to ride their bicycles up Lower King Street. Now, I know City Council is faced with tremendous challenges and opportunities here. Now, you're dealing with growth, rezoning, sea level rise, and a whole host of other problems, but you're also given this beautiful opportunity to reimagine the city, and that includes transportation in the city. Charleston is historic. There are many value tradition, and there's going to be pushback to any new approach to any problem. There's value in tradition and history. All you've got to do is look around at the beautiful buildings here. There's a reason so many people vacation here and then choose to move here. On the other hand, sometimes clinging to old ways can be maladaptive. Mixing cars and bikes on congested city streets is a really bad idea, especially a 14-foot wide shared lane. We also know that buffered bike lanes are safe and encourage cycling.
Time.
Think about those two scenarios. Which one is safer?
Carol Jackson, followed by Morgan Huey.
Good afternoon, Carol Jackson. I live on Patterson Avenue in James Island. I wish I could attest to how often I ride my bike on King Street. I'm lucky to get my husband out around our neighborhood on our beach bikes. But I do try to live my life learning from others, especially the expertise of others. And I spend a lot of my retirement time getting younger citizens to be more and more involved in the future of our community. It is our future. And I think this is the room that you have in front of you, ladies and gentlemen. So I think we should be paying attention to those who can quote the data like Mr. Conrad and Ms. Zimmerman, and the real life stories of people who are trying their best to be bikers and pedestrians in our favorite spot on the peninsula. I understand that the changes to the second version that you're now going to vote on were really just in answer to city's concerns, but I haven't been able to find out anything specific about what those concerns are. So I think at the very least, our elected officials should be able to explain that to the voters and the constituents and the citizens. The rumors are going around that it's all about delivery trucks. And I think we've got improved zoning, unloading and loading zones on every block of Lower King Street now, with the first plan and now this one. And driving down Calhoun, I try to avoid King Street, trying to dodge the loading trucks that are sticking out into the roadway from the parking where people are parked along the road on the meters. Then there's a truck, then the traffic is moving forward. That is not at all safe. And you squeeze in a biker in that whole configuration, whoever said it, that's a dangerous situation. I don't think you want to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Morgan Huey, followed by Kyle Hutmaker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Huey. I live at 82 Maple Street. I'm a faculty member at the College of Charleston, and I study how bikeability, walkability, and access to green space influences our health. I'm speaking as a resident today, not as a member of the College of Charleston. I mostly have a lot of questions. I also bike from 82 Maple. I bike to the college or take the bus every day. So I have similar experience to some expressed here. I had the same question Councilwoman Parker had. And so my understanding is that the plan that's before us today is more safe than the plan that was proposed last August after a public input period. And so I have questions about that. Which is safer, particularly for vulnerable road users? I think we really must also be concerned with the health and the environmental concerns. If businesses were concerned that the bike lane doesn't increase safety, can we confidently say that this plan will indeed improve safety? At the last meeting, a member of the committee mentioned that this plan aligned with the People Pedal Plan. My understanding is that plan was made with the constraints of knowing what could and could not be put forth through the DOT guidelines as well. I see this point, but I must respectfully disagree that this plan provides traffic calming, which is what's called for in this section of the streets. Further, if we're going to hold ourselves to the People Pedal Plan, when will we see bike lanes on Upper King, a cycle track on Calhoun and Rutledge, and more signage on nearly every street downtown? I really want to speak in favor of, we need a way for people to safely be able to bicycle across this peninsula.
Time.
We've got to try. I'm going to volunteer myself to study it in collaboration with others. I really think we must try.
Kyle Hutmaker, followed by Oliver Gill.
Huh,
Hey,
I
I'm
didn't
Kyle
recognize you.
Hutmaker.
Cleaned up your act.
20 Carolina Street. These guys have all said it much better than I could. If the King Street bike lane doesn't work, then I think that the city needs to come forth with a better option for pedestrians and for cyclists. I just want to be able to bike and walk through this city safely, more safely than currently allowed. So thank you.
Oliver Gill.
Hello, thank you for taking the time to hear our concerns. I think the first gentleman on Ray Street had it the best and was very eloquent in the way he said it. A 14-foot lane on King Street. Let's not kid. It already is a 14-foot lane. No cars go side by side right there. It's a joke. Everyone just kind of vies for position. So if you do a 14-foot lane, it's just going to make it more confusing. And then you get down King even farther outside of Miller's. 2 cars cannot physically fit there. I've seen the cars vying for position the way that the parking is. 1 car has to kind of stagger back. So let's just fix it all. Let's start with King Street. And then eventually the bike lane will, we'll get more St. Philip's meeting. It will spider out, and Charleston can be a place like the rest of the country, like Boulder, like New York, like San Francisco, these places that have actual good infrastructure for pedestrian and cycling movement. Whereas, I mean, have you the intersection at Rutledge and King where it's two lights and everyone just runs the first light because they see the second light turn green. All these situations of just absolute confusion, the absolute disgrace of what's happening right here in this intersection with these fake traffic lights is making that's just a death trap. I can't believe no one's been hurt so far. I just think the way the city's been taking care of this whole situation is a disgrace. Thank you.
So that's all from the list downstairs. We have 3 remaining speakers who signed up online. If you are online, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6, and we will get started with Taylor Cryan.
If you're there.
Taylor Cryan. All right. Moving on to Don Sparks.
Don's here. I saw him in person. There he is. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor, other members of the council. I've been listening to all the comments, and what I've struck by is what's not been said this afternoon. First of all, Mayor, thank you very much. Next time I park my bike on the railing, I've got your permission. I appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, I rode today, and so it will be taken care of somewhere. 2 things I haven't heard. One, I haven't heard anyone talk in support of a 14-foot lane because the safety issues have been so, I think, accurately portrayed here. We all know this, and I heard Mr. Dillon try to answer the question, and I respect you, sir. I mean, you must have a lot of experience to have your position, and I believe what you say, but I think you'd have to admit in the cold heart of the day that the wider the lane, the faster the speed, the less safe. The other thing I haven't heard today is commerce. I've been teaching economics at the Citadel for about 35 years. The mayor came and talked to my class a few weeks ago. And think about what this does to commerce. Not only does wider lanes increase car traffic, it also makes it less likely for you to notice a new store, less likely to pull over and park and shop in that store. So this proposal not only is unsafe, it didn't make sense commercially. So I'm mystified by why the DOT plan was changed. In addition, and I'd ask Mr. Dillon too, as he's going back to look at this again, please consider the counter-directional bike lanes. To me, the idea of King Street with a shared use one-way going south with cars and bikes makes sense. With a one-way counter-directional bike lane, the other way makes sense. So look at that again, because it's being done quite often in Europe and some other cities in America. Thank you very much, council members.
Jim Hemphill. Jim Hemphill.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think I might be the last speaker, so I think everyone said a lot of what I'm going to say. But I'm Jim Hemphill. I'm at 2124 Barber Drive. On the outset, I want to say I'm not opposed to the proposed cycle track on St. Philip Street. Like Katie said, I think there's a reason and a demand for both the bike lane on King Street and St. Philip. What I am opposed to is the proposed lane widening on King Street to 14 feet. So I want to quote the SCDOT roadway design manual, which is a favorite sleep aid of mine. And I quote, increased lane width reduces the demands placed on motorists by reducing the amount of concentration needed to stay within the travel lane. Wider lanes make people feel more comfortable traveling at higher speeds. Higher speeds mean greater risk of serious injury or death for everyone. And that's people inside the vehicle as well as people outside of the vehicle. So I'll hit you with some research too. According to NACDO, for every 3 feet in increased lane width, the 85th percentile speed, AKA the speed that most people drive, increases by about 10 miles per hour. So by widening this lane, you are increasing the speed of vehicles traveling on King Street. Furthermore, according to the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, an increase of speed from 25 to 35 miles per hour increases the likelihood of a fatal crash by 15%. So I'll leave you with 3 questions. One is Carol Jackson's question that she mentioned. Can you please be clear about what the city's concerns are with the original SCDOT proposal? Number 2 is, who or what entity created this alternative plan? It's my understanding the only public engagement so far has been a survey the city gave out to business owners and property owners on King Street. So just wondering where this plan came from. And then third, and most importantly, is why is the city pursuing a plan that will increase the likelihood of a fatal crash by 15%? Thank you very much.
And then finally, Taylor Cryan, one last time. All right. Those are all the public participation lists we have. We also received some public comments online, and I have a quick summary of those statements I can give if you
Give me
want.
1 second, if you don't mind. Is there anybody else here who would like to be heard or thought they were passed over? Because this is an opportunity. We've got some time. I see Mr. Quick back there. Anybody else? All right. Yes, ma'am. We'll get to you too, and then we'll go to the summary of the public comments. Thank you very much. Mr. Quick, you raise your hand first. Come on, come forward. Give us your name.
David Quick, and I will be quick. I live in Mount Pleasant, but I rode my bike downtown a lot when I was working for the Post and Courier. Still ride my bike downtown. Sometimes the best way to get there. So as a Mount Pleasant resident who loves downtown Charleston, I'd really like to have more options to ride my bike safely downtown. I think this 14-foot proposal with crazy stuff like parking on both sides is a bit like the First Union Pier design. And I think maybe stepping back, King Street is, all of King Street, but particularly Calhoun down Broad is such a gem. And there are great cities around the world. And I consider Charleston a great city that do better with pedestrian streets. And I really think we need to pull back and really think long and hard before we go forward with a 14-foot, because it's like the Wild West on King Street, especially after night. Anybody's been down there after 9 o'clock on the motorcycles and the big hyped up trucks they will use that as a dragway. I guarantee you, they will see that as an opportunity. Ran down King Street. So please think carefully about this. Thank you for squeezing me in.
Yes, ma'am. Come forward. Please give us your name.
Hi, my name is Caroline. I live on 23 Ashton Street. I'm also here with the Charleston Climate Coalition. I want to reiterate that last point, whoever was online, to challenge you in, okay, if these business owners are opposed to this original plan, where are they? We've heard so much from residents that really actually took the time out of their workday to be here on a 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. And it looks like the reality is that some of these business owners don't have to do that, and they have the luxury to have these sorts of meetings behind closed doors. So We've heard a lot from residents, but we have heard really nothing from business owners. Them only mentioned as the reason why some of this was potentially changed. So I think there's a lot of confusion on that, and it would be remiss to move forward amidst all of that confusion without that clarification. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right. Is there anybody else who feels like we missed you? If not, now please give us, how many comments online did we get?
All of these comments were sent to the committee in full for their review prior to this meeting. We received 42 in total.
Okay, thank you.
So 35 of those comments, including one joint comment submitted by the Coastal Conservation League and Historic Charleston Foundation, were against a 14-foot shared traffic lane. They all said wide lanes would encourage speeding and cause accidents, whereas dedicated bike lanes were safer for tourists and locals, promoted businesses, increased neighborhood connectivity, and helped contend with global warming. One resident asked the city to step up the enforcement of loading zone rules and to consider adding periodic tree wells to King Street because there was no shade at all. One resident said they liked that King Street would be one lane, but wanted more safety precautions for non-motorized vehicles. One resident said that the city needed to move beyond superficial markings and prioritize the development of solid, well-designed infrastructure that ensures the safety and convenience of all road users, and that paint and sharrows, though useful for indicating traffic flow and potential hazards, do not provide the level of protection and separation required to safeguard vulnerable road users. 3 residents supported eliminating cars on King Street south of Calhoun altogether because it is a shopping and tourist district. And finally, 1 resident supported banning bikes on King Street because of the danger that vehicle traffic posed to cyclists, and said that many of those bikers were tourists and usually did not adhere to traffic and bike laws. Those are all the comments that we received.
All right, thank you very much. All right, that'll close out the public comment period of this meeting. And it brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there any member of the committee who'd like to, after hearing the presentation from the SCDOT, after hearing public comment, would like to make any comment at this committee meeting before we move this along to City Council? Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification on the process, and I think it'd be good for everybody to understand this. And really, if we move this forward, we're just saying that we're going to move forward with a design. Right now, this is obviously highly conceptual. And so I think it'd be good just to get some clarification on the process moving forward, that this is really just approval to or recommendation to move forward with some detailed design of what DOT has been talking about, correct? And that's a question for you.
Procedurally, where we are is this. In order to move forward with this road safety project, which includes all of the streets that you heard, King Street, Calhoun Street, St. Philip Street, and Meeting Street, there needs to be a memorandum of understanding between the city and the SCDOT. What needs to happen through this committee and city council is to give the mayor the authorization to sign the memorandum of understanding to move this to the next phase, which is the design phase. And please let me know if I'm misstating anything. At that point, the project will go through the design phase before any implementation. Am I correct about where we are procedurally?
Yeah, move from preliminary design to the final design.
Gotcha. So what
thank you very much.
yeah, thanks. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if Mr. Dillon the 14, can you tell me a little more about the 14-foot lane from the SCDOT standpoint? I know we've had this discussion before, but I think it's good if you can explain it to me again.
Just, could you give me a little more clarification?
So just from a safety standpoint, you know, I'm looking at the, let's say, for instance, we have 14 feet. I mean, so the lines are going to be drawn at 14 feet, or can we make the lane smaller? And can you just explain that, you know, if SCDOT is recommending a 14-foot lane with 2 lines drawn for 14 feet, can you explain there how SCDOT says that is safer?
Okay, so I'll kind of address two thoughts there. I think our our primary goal initially was to look at the non-functioning 2 lanes and to try to move to a road diet. And so that reduced the travel lanes for the vehicles that were out there. I'll be looking at Kaylin to poke me if I'm off target. And so that, in a sense, meant we were reallocating width. There's no construction that's going on in terms of changing curb or anything like that. So we know we're reducing, we don't have 2 vehicle lanes, we're going to 1 vehicle lane, and then it's just a question of reallocating that space. And so for us, with this being federal safety funds, what we're comparing that to is the existing condition. We're not comparing alternatives to each other per se. So as we move to try to move from the existing condition to an improved condition, we have to do that by working with all the stakeholders to move the project forward. And so, yes, our original proposal reallocated that space and provided a marked bike lane. And then in response to feedback, when it was indicated, come up with an alternative that does not have a marked bike lane, that instead reallocates the space differently. We proposed the 14-foot shared lane is what we would call it, and sort of added a foot or 2 on each side to improve some sidewalk buffer and things like that in the full. So that's how we got to the position that we're in.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So can we tighten the lane? Because again, I think it's important for everybody here as well as I learned at the last meeting, that another reason for some of this is that the hope in the future is to expand those sidewalks, so we have more of a footprint for the pedestrians, correct? So I guess my final question is just that 14-inch lane, can the lines be narrowed in, so the lane is smaller?
Well, I mean, I think the answer to your question is that we are still in the project development process. Right now, these are all just lines on a page on paper. This is a submitted typical. There isn't anything that's been locked in. The municipal agreement process is what holds us accountable to the local community, right? So that we in Columbia at SCDOT with the state don't make decisions and overrun the local context and what that community wants. So road safety audit projects are unique because they have the stakeholder involvement that maybe some of our typical road projects don't have, where we address a lot of stakeholder needs. We had the public meeting. The reason we have a public meeting is to get feedback and get comments. And so we can hear what's needed. So in a sense, I mean, we are all still very much open. Like I said in my statement, we're going to have public engagement in this throughout the entire process. We're going to always be engaged, even when we move to when we're into construction, making sure that we're constructing it in the right way. So the short answer is yes. Whatever the city of Charleston or its representatives or council would like to work through with us, we are open to do that, which is why we have attended every meeting that we can and has provided as much information as we can.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, thank you for scheduling this additional meeting. I think having the public comments and engagement has been very positive and good for all of us. I want to go back first to Mr. Dillon's first remarks about the many safety improvements that are planned. We're focusing on really this short part of Lower King Street from Calhoun to Liberty Street, where it's only 24 feet wide. But in fact, there are crosswalk improvements and other bulb outs and other, what do they call it when everybody walks at the same time?
I call them all-way crosswalks.
All-way crosswalks.
Scatter crosswalks.
Therefore, those planned at different parts of the 4 streets meeting King, Calhoun, and St. Philip that are slated for safety improvements. And I do ask council whether we respectfully all agree or disagree on the final product. To please give me the authority after our next council meeting to move forward with an agreement with the SCDOT. So we can move forward to final design. We don't want to hold up any longer the many other safety improvements comes with this package. I mean, it's really significant, probably the most significant combination of safety improvements for our central business district and downtown Charleston than we've seen in a generation or more. Isn't that right? So we need to move this ball forward. So secondly, you mentioned the road diet and the 14-foot lane in the redesign. I must say after, and it's why I asked the question at the beginning, before the public comments, I think it's driven through my head that we need to reduce that lane. That makes sense to me, that lane should be reduced. Now, when you go on the diet, what happens to the rest of the street? You know, does it become a bike lane? Does it become a sidewalk? That's, I guess, a question at hand. So I'm probably going to talk too long, Mr. Chairman, but if you allow me, you know, conditions currently are not good. And when I'm driving down King Street in that section, I'm normally in the left lane because there's normally a delivery truck in the right lane. And thankfully for the businesses along there, y'all, King Street is busy. It's crowded. Most times there's lots of pedestrians. There's a heck of a lot more pedestrians than any other movement going on the street from what I see with my eyes, bicycles, even cars. There's more pedestrians most of the time. And there's something about visitors, and I must admit a little sympathy, because I feel like this sometimes when I go out of town. You know, we have all these visitors come to Charleston, and they feel like they can just walk anywhere they want, you know, and not pay attention to crosswalks or lights. They just kind of wander about. And you really have to be intent when you're driving down that left lane to be mindful for people that just step off the sidewalk. They're not even looking, and they step into the lane of traffic. And it certainly looks very unsafe. I don't know how many of those pedestrian collisions resulted from people just doing that. But I notice it all the time when I'm driving down there. And if I were king for the day and not the mayor, and had all the money in the world and we had all the time to re-engineer things, frankly, I would, in giving that road a diet, I would add to the sidewalks on either side and give the pedestrians some more room on King Street. They are more pedestrians than anybody else down there. And so just by way of explanation, I want to share with you that even though I get it now, the 14-foot lane is too wide, but the reason why in this redesign that there was a foot on either side, not just on the travel lane side, but on the parking side, was to give pedestrians just that little bit of extra safety room where if they step off the sidewalk, you know, they're not getting hit. Now, could that be wider than 1 foot? I think it could be. And you could end up with 2 or 3 feet. Could it be a bike lane? Yeah, that was the first design, but it could also be one of these little hatched areas that's kind of a safety zone, if you will. Maybe that's, I've seen some nodding and shaking. I don't know if that was an affirmation or not. Would somebody walk in that safety zone or ride a bike in it? You know, maybe. But I bring all this up because I firmly believe that over time, no matter what we plan today, be it a bike lane or an expanded safety zone on either side of the street, which would reduce that 14-foot lane, if that makes sense, that from my perspective, we want to come back with a more complete streetscape improvement that will move the curb out on both sides and make a bigger sidewalk on both sides. Now, how long that's going to take, I don't know. It'll take a while because you get into many issues when you do streetscape improvements. And really, y'all, the section that given us all the heartburn is the most narrow part of King Street. You know, from Calhoun to Liberty Street, what it says right here, It's only 24 feet wide. So when you get down to Wentworth, maybe it's Liberty, but at least I think of it being Wentworth and below, it widens back up to 32 feet. And so you got a little more room, to have a bike lane there permanently if you wanted to do that. And so in keeping with the bike ped plan, the fact that you can have two-way bike traffic and allow for room on King Street, particularly in this most narrow section, to have things like future expansion of the sidewalk, a left turn lane when you get to George Street, I think would be helpful. The ability to plant a tree or two when you expand the sidewalk, to have those bulb outs that you mentioned. If you have the bike lane there, is that going to make it difficult to have a left turn lane and a bulb out? Probably, right? So I just respectfully think that one section, that one narrow section, 24 feet wide from Calhoun to Liberty Street, I'm all for reducing the 14-foot lane. I think there needs to be a bigger safety zone, if you will, on both sides. But I still respectfully think the bike ped plan had it right to use St. Philip Street, and maybe above Calhoun and below Wentworth. It's a different matter where you got a little more real estate and width to deal with. But anyway, I'm just sharing my own observations of what I think makes sense. We certainly need to reduce the lane, widen the safety zone, or have the original proposed plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other member of the committee? Yes, sir. Councilmember Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've just been thinking kind of long and hard about this, and people have heard me say before that a camel is a horse made by committee. And this is the 14-foot lane in my mind is a terrible camel. That being said, we often sit in these seats and have to choose the least bad options. Like there's usually never a great option. It's the least bad. But in this instance, the original proposal is a good option. They gain parking spaces, you gain loading zones, and there's a bike facility on King Street. So I'll be voting no to move this forward for that reason, in that I think that the original proposal is a net win all the way around for the city versus trying to now manipulate or change a 14-foot travel lane as we move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any other member of the committee? Councilmember Shade is here. I'm going to give him a minute and a half to make comment. Go.
I may take longer than that, but thank you,
No.
Mr. Chairman.
Time.
Let me, it'll take me a little bit more than a minute, but so first of all, I thank the South Carolina Department of Transportation for coming forward with this. I'm gonna state the obvious. King Street is a disaster. It is a complete disaster for a number of reasons. The number of cars that go up and down King Street cannot handle it. We have a share driver system that stops in the middle of the road. We have delivery trucks who totally ignore where they're supposed to park and load and unload their goods. That's part of the responsibility of the city to address that more aggressively. We have pedestrians, as the mayor mentioned, who just step off the sidewalk needlessly. But it is a complete disaster. The other day, there were 3 trucks parked in the left-hand lane unloading. They were spaced out. Plus, the Carter bus was making the stops, not using their turnoff portion to unload their passengers or load their passengers. Plus, there were folks on skateboards going in opposite directions. Almost had a collision in front of my hood of my car, going in the opposite direction down the middle of King Street. And this is an ongoing occurrence. My office is right on King Street. I observe this on a regular basis. The flow of traffic is impossible to manipulate and handle. And we've got to look at this from a holistic standpoint. we changed the direction of north of King Street several decades ago, and it had such a tremendous and positive impact on the commercial part of our city. And I just look at that as an example of what we can do positively to improve our commercial district. Whatever we do with this change or these proposals cannot have the reverse effect. It cannot have a negative impact on our commercial corridor. So I think what's critically important, and you mentioned this, Mr. Dillon, a little bit earlier in your statements about your involvement with the stakeholders on King Street. But I would like to hear more from them as well as to what they perceive as the negative part of all of this, because you've got to have not just people, but vehicles going up and down King Street, be able to visit, to patronize these establishments, to make the loading and unloading. I would ask that you also look at this from another holistic standpoint. Whatever you do on King Street, whatever changes we make on King Street is going to have an impact, not just on Meeting Street, not just on St. Philip Street. It's going to have an impact on East Bay Street. It's going to have an impact on Rutledge Avenue. And it's also going to have an impact on the other side streets, not just Calhoun or George or Line, but all the other side streets that intersect those four streets of Rutledge, King, Meeting, and East Bay. So traffic flow of cars coming in the morning and cars going out in the afternoon and early evening need to be aware of the impact, whatever changes we make on King Street. We've got to take that into consideration. So I ask that would you go back and as you redefining all of this, please take into account the rest of the peninsula, not just the streets that you've identified here, but also identify those streets that go north and south and east and west that run along this perimeter. I think that we need y'all's assistance, and I've talked to Mr. Somerville about this on numerous occasions about the enforcement we need to have with these delivery trucks and these rideshare vehicles, and even our own CARTA system as to how we need to improve. Whatever we do here is not going to have a nickel of an impact. It's going to have probably a reverse negative impact if we don't address these delivery trucks and these rideshare components as well. If we don't do those things, we're going to aggravate a existing problem to something worse. It's going to have the reverse effect, what I mentioned to you a minute ago, when we reverse King Street going north, which was a positive thing. I don't want whatever changes we make have a negative thing. And just one last little comment, Mr. Dillon, I represent parts of West Ashley, and I represent Charlestown Landing area and parts of Ashley, Maryville. They may take issue with you in describing that King and Meeting with the older streets, because I think that Fifth Avenue, Maryville may have preceded King and Meeting Street back in 1670. So they take a lot of pride in that street as well, just as a little side note. So, but thank you for all being here, and I'd be glad to continue this discussion with you later on. But those are my comments and my observations about what we need to be doing with King Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Parker, I see your hand is back up again. Am I right
Thank you,
about that?
Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Councilmember Brady's comment, I mean, again, giving the mayor direction to have conversations with FCDOT, we can still, I think Dylan just told me earlier, we can completely modify these lanes, these lines, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else, any member of the committee? I've been pretty quiet. I want to make just a couple of very few brief comments just procedurally so you know where we are. First, thank you all for coming. It's been impactful, just so you know. Before you all run out of here and get into the rumor mill, I hope you'll remember what you've seen here today and in the last meeting that we're listening, and we are listening. Please don't go run out and tell people we're ruining the corner of Broad Street and Meeting Street. That's actually repair to make it safer. Temporary, so please don't fill up our boxes about that. It's going to get better. Where we are procedurally is this committee has voted to send this on to City Council for its full vote as to whether or not to send this to the mayor's desk to sign a municipal agreement with the DOT to put the road safety audit as generally proposed into the final design phase. Giving him the authority to do that does not mean this is all signed, sealed, and delivered. What we've heard today has been impactful. As you can see, you've already got one council member who's thought differently than he did the last time he was here, which is great. I think the King Street portion of this is something we need to look at, but don't forget, please, all of you that have been here today, that is a very small part of a much bigger road safety audit. We didn't hear a single comment today about the rest of it, how good it is. And it is great. It's great. We've needed it for a long time. And for those of you that I know around this room that I've known for a long time, you know we need that stuff, and we do. Getting King Street right is maybe going to take some time and is going to take some blood on the tracks a little bit. We're gonna have to really think about this. The rest of it, we got to get going on. We got to give the mayor the authority to sign on so we can have an agreement with the SCDOT to paint new crosswalks, to make crossing lights much brighter, much more visible. All the things that have been suggested in this road safety audit. Please, all of you, if you haven't done it, read it, because it's going to make this city a much better place. And I can assure you, my district and where I live is in the heart of all of this. I see it every single day from every single perspective. Walking, driving, biking. I live here, I work here. I agree with the observations that we need help here. We do. The numbers bear it out. They do. The DOT didn't show up here out of the blue. They came through some metrics that we need to do some things, and we do. The enemy of good, of course, is better. And so let's be thoughtful about this. And when it's all said and done, let's say that we did the best thing for safety that was thoughtful, but was not reactionary. That's personally, as a person who gets a vote on this and sits and lives in the middle of it, that's going to be my approach to it every single time. Safety always wins on a thoughtful basis. I heard a couple of things today that I really liked too. Mr. Sparks, I'm going to single you out. The contra flow is a really great idea. That's the first time it's actually been brought up. You've got one-way bike lanes or one-way lanes going into it. If you go down King Street, Mayor, if you drove down it today, or if you all drove down it today, one of the things you see on King Street every single day, every single hour, every single minute is pedestrians walking in opposite directions. And when they meet each other and they can't get past each other, the ones that are on the outside, what's the first thing they do? They step into the lane of traffic every single time. If you haven't done it, you are the exception, not the rule. I see one of my constituents back there, Dr. Ham, he's done it. I've done it. We've all done it, right? We need to think about the pedestrian side of that narrow part of King Street too. It's super important. We're not excluding anything. We're not taking anything away. All that stuff, we're not doing it. And we're not doing it behind closed doors. I can just tell you that's not happening. You want to know how we know what people think about this? For those who've asked it, we listen to our constituents. I live in the middle of this. King Street is my constituency, Charleston Village and all of downtown. People are talking about this. That's how we hear about it. That's how we know about it. And that's how we communicate. That's human nature, right? So we're going to put this all in the mix. We're going to talk to the SCDOT, who ultimately is going to be our partner for this, spending your tax dollars in a way that makes the city safer and makes it better for all of us, So with that, this will be taken up at City Council at our next City Council meeting with an original recommendation to give the mayor the ability to sign the shared agreement with the SCDOT. That's where we are. Whether that changes at council, I don't know. It'll come out of a report from this committee. You've heard some indications that it might. We'll just see how all that goes. But we collectively have an absolute obligation to our city to make sure that we put into place the best plan we can to make it safer. You know, we just started this heads up campaign. It seems super simple, right? Heads up, look around you, be safe when you're driving, when you're riding your bike, when you're walking, when you're riding your skateboard the wrong way up King Street. Please don't do that. Heads up, be conscious of your surroundings. And then we together collectively will do what we can, the best way we can to make this city the safest place it can be. Recognizing that you heard, and I thought really thoughtful comments at the beginning, we're dealing with infrastructure that was gridded out long before anyone thought about a car, a bike, well, bikes, maybe early days, but any of that. So we have some limitations, right? We don't have unlimited real estate. So again, thank you all for being here. We'll take this up at City Council. What's the date of our next City Council meeting? Next Tuesday? Next Tuesday. Whatever that date is. The meeting is not here. It's at Charlestown Landing. Am I right about that? So if you're planning on attending, plan on being at Charlestown Landing. We hear you. I'm going to report out that we've heard you. All right. And then we'll sort of see how this all goes. And just so you know, we're going to have conversations between now and then about this. All right. So we'll see how it all goes. If there's anything else, Mr. Mayor.
I would just say that's assuming they assure us that the air conditioning is working.
Right, right. By the way, also, we've been told that we have to be out of there no later than 11 o'clock. So not that we want to be there till 11 o'clock, so we have limited time. All right. If there's nothing else for the greater good, especially for the road safety audit that's before us, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank everybody for coming, and we'll see you, if not before, on Tuesday. Thank you.
Good to see you.